refresh again. Hey everyone, welcome to our first event during Hop Culture's Digital Woman in Craft Beer Festival, Beers Without Beards, empowered by Bumble. As many of you might know or may not know, my name is Grace Weitz. I'm the head of partnerships at Hop Culture and also the creator of our Women in Craft Beer Festival, Beers Without Beards. So I actually started this festival as my graduate school thesis project just about 3 years ago and had grand plans to host it in New York for a third time this year, and then on the West Coast for the first time. And obviously, as we know, COVID had other plans for us, but this festival, we knew it was just too important to completely give the axe to. So I'm super excited to kick off the festival tonight with an event in collaboration with Tröegs, Independent Brewing, and Craft Beer Cellar. So we actually teamed up with Tröegs last year to host an event at BWV 2019, and this year, one of the nation's top craft beer retailers, Craft Beer Cellar, is joining us for this amazing panel. So tonight, it's bringing beer to life. I actually started in this industry just as a beer rep, selling beer for a small brewery in Chicago. So I knew when I created Beers Without Beards that I wanted this festival to incorporate all women in craft beer, whether that was a brewer, a brewery owner, a designer, someone in marketing and sales. And so this panel is really going to focus on how we can bring beer to life outside of the brew house floor and the different and multitude of ways that we can do that, whether it's through a #1 rated tour in the country or through designing a brand and a label, much like this Haze Charmer label right here. So we're all drinking our Haze Charmer beer. It's Tröegs' new hazy pale ale that you're going to learn more about tonight. So just to kind of give you the rundown of the evening, I'm going to have these three lovely ladies with me introduce themselves personally, and then I will say goodbye, and they'll all run you through the different areas of how they bring beer to life in their daily lives, and then I'll come back in at the end to moderate a Q&A if we have time. So just a quick note, you guys will see that you have a chat function. Feel free to leave comments, questions at any time. We'll be able to, in our Q&A, pull those up on the screen and answer them as best we can. So we'll be moderating that throughout the panel. So without further ado, if we could just I would love everyone to briefly introduce themselves and just tell us what you do. So Christie, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christie Yurkovic. I am the brewery experience and tour supervisor here at Tröegs. So I wear many hats around here, but in general, I manage the tour department and I am a part of the marketing team. Unfortunately, since COVID hit, the tour department has had to take a brief hiatus. So kind of in the interim, I'm working with the retail department to help with the tasting room and the general store.
Yeah, Christie, you may be taking a brief hiatus, but I think we calculated that over the course of your time at Tröegs, you've given something like 3,700 tours, close to 4,000. So probably a well-deserved break, if you will.
Yeah, a little vacation, if you will.
Yeah, and then
but
Lindsey,
I miss it terribly.
Lindsey, you are the one who has been the brains behind the lovely design of this new beer label. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I am a graphic designer and illustrator based in Philadelphia. I've worked with Tröegs for about the last 5 years. I worked on the original rebrand, the logo and the packaging redesign, and I've done several labels for them each year since then.
Amazing. And last but very not least, Suzanne, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do with Craft Beer Cellar.
Thank you, Grace, and super awesome to be here with Christie and Lindsey this evening. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO currently of Craft Beer Cellar, and hopefully I sell more beer than anyone else, and hopefully I sell more Tröegs than anyone else. I'm not sure that's true so much anymore, but I mean, I work in beer, and I get to spend my time around really amazing beer people. So Craft Beer Cellar is a 22 location small franchise company started in Boston, Mass. We've been kind of friendly with breweries like Tröegs for a long time. And it's breweries like this that, you know, when I start to look back at 2010, when we started the first store, there were 2,000 breweries in the US, right? Now there are over 8,000. And so it's pretty interesting. I mean, Tröegs was there then at the time, and some of the people that were kind of cheering us on to do it. I don't think conceptually anyone understood what opening a bottle shop looked like in 2010, and then to take it on a couple of years later and turn it into a franchise model where we were opening stores around the country. So it was an interesting ride. It's been an interesting ride for us as well. Yeah, I look forward to talking just a little bit more about it. It's super great to be here. This beer is smashingly awesome. I'm super happy to be drinking it. And I look forward to hearing more from Lindsey as well as Christie. I mean, I know these ladies obviously, but it's cool to get a little bit more behind the scenes.
Yeah, and that's the great part of this event is that we're bringing together all different types of people, that you guys have your hands in all different areas of bringing beer to life. And so, with Craft Beer Cellar, you guys really focus on the relationships and developing relationships with the breweries and the beers that you carry. So I'm definitely excited to dig into a little bit more about how you bring that beer to life on your shelves towards the end of the panel. But to start us off, Christie, I know you're going to tell us a little bit more about how you've helped shape what USA Today and 10best.com rates as the #1 brewery tour in the country. So I'm going to get out of everyone's hair and let you take it away, and I'll be back for the Q&A at the end.
Thank you very much, Grace. All right. Well, thank you everybody who logged in today to chat with Suzanne and Lindsey and I. I'm really excited to kind of walk you through Haze Charmer this evening, and we definitely will get to that, a little anticipation. If you aren't totally familiar with Tröegs, though, I can give you kind of a brief background. We are a family-owned and independent craft brewer started right here in central Pennsylvania. We were founded by Chris and John Tröegs, who are 2 local brothers who still run the business today, every day. And the original brewery was actually a little bit down the road from here in Harrisburg. That's where they landed back in 1997 and opened their doors there. They got to spend those wonderful years up until about 2011 in Harrisburg. During that time, beers that you might be familiar with, like Hopback and Tröegs, even Mad Elf, which is coming soon. They were born and bred there at that Harrisburg location. But eventually, they kind of outgrew the space. And Chris and John started looking around to find a new location and ultimately ended up here in Hershey, where we are today and have been ever since. And now, over the years, they've grown exponentially. Tröegs is now one of the top craft brewers in the nation. We've grown from just Chris and John as the only employees to nearly 250 employees overall. And even a beer like Perpetual IPA has become the #1 IPA in Pennsylvania. So we're super proud of what we do here and our achievements, and the family that is Tröegs Independent Brewing. But again, today I am super excited to bring to you and introduce to you the newest year-round beer in our lineup, Haze Charmer, which hopefully everyone's got handy in front of you. Yes. So I'm going to essentially take you through it in a sensory way. And believe it or not, there is some interesting ways to smell and taste your beer, and hopefully you can take this experience and walk away from it, and the next beer you drink down the road, kind of think about what you've learned tonight. So Haze Charmer is a dry hopped hazy pale ale that was born and bred from our scratch beer system, which is our small batch experimental system here at the brewery. And I'll kind of dive into that just a little bit more later on. But before that, we want to get to everybody's favorite part, which is actually drinking the beer. So hopefully you have your beer in front of you. I'm going to crack mine open here. I've been holding off. If you haven't already poured your beer, I recommend grabbing your favorite glass. I prefer a hearty chalice glass. That's my favorite. And if you can, thank you, Lindsay, pour it about halfway. If you've got a full glass, I don't blame you. Go ahead and enjoy and follow along as you can. But I mentioned that I kind of want to make this a full sensory experience. Drinking a beer is not just about drinking. It's about, the sight, the smell, the taste, even the feeling of the beer, what we would call the mouthfeel of the beer, how it literally feels on your tongue, are all really important in discovering that beer and what you're drinking. So that's what I'm going to kind of work you through tonight. And how we're going to start is with sight. So I would love for you to hold that beer up to the light and consider your beer. It's in an ancient Japanese culture tradition to consider what you're eating and what you're drinking and really observe it and take it in. So with Haze Charmer, it is a hazy pale ale. It's got this beautiful kind of golden hue to it, a classic fluffy white head on it. Next, what I'm going to ask you to do is to actually cup your beer, kind of place your hand over the top of that glass and gently swirl it around. So you want to kind of agitate that beer. See if I can get on the screen. There you go. Agitate that beer. Get those bubbles going. Then lift your hand just slightly enough to get your nose in there and take 3 quick sniffs. So right away, you're probably going to notice some really intense fruity flavors. Personally, I get a lot of pineapple right off the bat from that initial sip. But what's interesting too is if you do the same thing, cup your beer, give it a little swirl, and then stick your nose in there and take 1 long, big sniff in, that aroma might change for you. Sometimes your olfactory will pick up different aromas depending on how you actually sniff that beer and work through those aromatics that are pulling through. So I recommend giving that a try. And what's really wonderful too is there are no wrong answers when it comes to what you're smelling or what you're tasting. Everybody smells and tastes a little bit differently. So, maybe what you're pulling out isn't a pineapple. Maybe you're smelling pear or citrus or something else really awesome. I recommend writing that in the comments section. As you're going through this exercise, let me know what you're smelling and sniffing and tasting along the way. It would be really great to hear it. So if we're feeling comfortable with the smell portion, the next best part is tasting it, obviously. So cheers, everybody. I recommend taking a small sip and actually holding that beer in your mouth. Don't swallow it right away. Chew on that beer. I know it sounds a little strange. It might feel a little strange. But as you chew on that beer, it's actually going to push it around your mouth so that it'll hit all of your taste buds. I'm going to give it a try myself here. So also, as you swallow that beer, breathe out through your nose. Keep your mouth closed, breathe out through your nose. That also is going to kind of reinvigorate your olfactory senses, your sense of smell. So something that you might not have smelled earlier, or might not have tasted initially, might come to the forefront. So it's really interesting to kind of engage all of those senses together and have them work in harmony to give you this really kind of full-bodied and rounded experience when it comes to drinking a wonderful craft beer. The haze of the beer here is really important too. So kind of a while ago, is back in late 2019, I believe, that Chris and John and the brew team, along with the folks who work in our quality control lab, they really wanted to take hazy beer a step further. They wanted to look past the grain bill of the beer and how that contributes to haze. They wanted to look past the filtration, and they wanted to understand really critically like what haze does for a beer and how it can ultimately enhance it and bring different flavors and aromas to light. So that's what they did. So I mentioned our Scratch Beer series and our Scratch Beer system earlier. What this is a 15-barrel brew system here in the brewery, right down in our tasting room. If you've ever visited before, you've probably seen it. It's right next to the main 100-barrel brew house. That's where our brewers get to experiment and play and change up, different recipes, work with different ingredients, and kind of bring these ideas to life. So when they first started experimenting, with a hazy pale ale, again, they wanted to understand how haze can make that beer ultimately the best that it can be. And what they discovered is that the haze ultimately helps to prop up the hop oils within that beer. So what it's doing is it's ultimately delivering the best of the hops, those flavors and those aromatics to you, without increasing the overall bitterness of the beer. So it's leaving it nice and drinkable and sessionable, which is exactly what you get with Haze Charmer. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of look at it from a different perspective and kind of work through it. I think we ultimately worked through, I believe, 8 different scratch beer batches to bring Haze Charmer to life, and it's definitely well deserved. If anybody has any questions too, please feel free to call them out. I think that's all I've got at the moment for you, though.
Nice, Christie. Well, that sounds like a great way to kind of kick off this panel and see how we can bring Haze Charmer to life through a tasting. So I see that everyone's sipping on their beer. I hope you guys are at home as well. So now I'd really love to turn it over to Lindsey and chat a little bit more about how you brought this brand to life from the very inception, from design all the way to different sketches to putting the label on the can that you guys see today. So Lindsey, can you give us a little bit more perspective on your end about how you brought this brand to life?
Absolutely. Let me just share my screen here. All right, looks like we're up. So as we mentioned in the introduction, I am a graphic designer and illustrator. My work spans everything from branding and editorial design, but I primarily focus on, I bring a lot of like hand lettering and custom typography into a lot of what I do, which actually lended itself really well to what I'm going to show you with everything we've done for Tröegs. So back in 2015, actually might have been late 2014, 2015-ish, I was working at an agency in Philadelphia who had a long-standing relationship with Tröegs. Going back to the 90s, I believe, they had designed all of their original packaging. And kind of had this, existing relationship with Tröegs, but hadn't done a lot of work for them, primarily because they hadn't really put out any new beers in a few years. But, we ended up getting contacted about a new beer that they were working on, and they wanted to engage with us to design it. And I was one of the only designers at the time there who had an illustration background. So I was really fortunate to be put on the project. So this is what Tröegs looked like when I first met them. A lot of it, is kind of in keeping with what you would expect today. They had this kind of cool illustrated thing going on. But they wanted to design this new beer, Hop Knife. And, the thing that's challenging about this, coming into it as a, new designer who had not previously worked on the brand or, kind of done anything for them, was, you clearly have your own style and your own way that you like to do things. But you need to kind of still design something that's going to be in keeping with everything that already exists and feels cohesive. So what we ended up doing with Hop Knife, you can see here where we landed with the design, was something that was, on the 6-pack and on the label, full color, type focused, pretty much felt in keeping with what they were already doing. But where we deviated a little bit was on this 24-pack, where we stripped it back to just this kind of 3-color palette, cream, charcoal, and the bright green, and kept it like super simple and super clean. And the response to this was super, super positive. And Tröegs came to us and they said, we've had like an overwhelmingly great response to this. And we've been toying with the idea of redesigning the brand, start to, doing the logo kind of top to bottom, just doing a complete rebrand. And we would like you to kind of use this case as your, lighthouse, like as your North Star for this rebrand, which if there are any designers listening, that's not like the best way to start a project like this. Like you kind of think like, oh, well, if I knew I was going to be rebranding the whole thing, maybe I would have approached things differently or done this or that. But it actually ended up working out really well because it kind of gave us a starting point to know like, okay, great. They like, that we've kept it so clean, that we've pared everything back, that we're keeping the palette really simple, and doing things pretty differently from where they've been in the past. So this was kind of our starting point in the rebrand. And what we wanted to do then was step back and take a look at like, okay, what does the craft beer shelf look like right now? And again, this was about 5 years ago. So things have evolved a bit since then. And we feel very, I feel good about the fact that, I think a lot of trends have kind of gone the way that we had originally set things back in 2015. Like we kind of saw how you can look at this shelf and see like, well, there's a ton of competition. It's super busy. There's a lot of like really heavy, like there's black and brown and kind of these dark, kind of heavy colors, a lot of information going on all the labels. And we looked at this and we saw like, okay, I can see why this case did so well because it is so different. So simple in its design, it can be seen, from across the store. You can spot Tröegs from a mile away. So we kind of took that, okay, that's a good starting point for what we're doing with the brand. And of course we start with the logo, before you do the packaging, before you do anything else, we really wanted to make sure the logo was right. And I should also say too, that Chris and John were very involved in this whole process, which again, like much like backing into the rebrand, a lot of times, you think it's tough client involvement, like a lot of times like personal preferences come into play that may or may not be like super relevant to the audience. But in this case, it was very helpful because, I was someone who, keep it a secret, but wasn't much of a beer drinker at the time. Didn't have like a ton of insight into the category. And they brought all that knowledge and all those insights and really helped me out a lot. And not to mention, they're just like super passionate and, super involved in all the processes from, brewing the beer to the day-to-day operations. Their enthusiasm for what they do really inspired me. And really drove a lot of the process in a really positive direction. So it was great getting to know Chris and John and having them be involved throughout the whole process. So like I was saying, we do have to start with the logo. And, where we were before, there's a lot of again, going back to those labels that we kind of saw on the shelf. There's a lot of information going on here. You have Tröegs, independent craft brewery, Pennsylvania, handcrafted by the Tröegs brothers. And then the hops, and then these distressing elements and a couple different colors. And there's just kind of a lot going on. So we wanted to look at it and see like, what can we strip out of here? What really needs to stay? Chris and John were adamant that Tröegs would remain independent, and they knew that that would be the case moving forward. So that was where we landed, where, we really want to highlight that this is Tröegs independent brewing. So that maintained in the lockup. And this shape here, a lot of people see a guitar pick is kind of what comes to a lot of people's minds. We think of it as sort of like an abstract hop cone. But what I love about this is that it maintained that kind of like rough around the edges, like handcrafted, perfectly imperfect kind of look and feel that they were always, that was kind of a mainstay of the brand from the beginning. So then once we started to take a look at like, okay, let's redesign all of these labels. And, you know, for the most part, particularly something like Perpetual, there's a lot of brand equity there. You know, like it was already a very beloved beer. A lot of people knew it. A lot of people recognized it on the shelves. They knew what they were looking for. And oftentimes, you know, these labels, there's a story behind them and there's a reason why they were designed that way to begin with. There's, you know, there are influences in the brewing process or the flavor or whatever else that come into that illustration. So Perpetual was always the way they described it was the fusion of the mechanical and the organic. So it was all about the brewing process with this hop back vessel and how it would move through that. So we kept those gear elements and created like a clockwork hop, and kind of, you know, wanted to maintain that, you know, the existing kind of story there. And that was where we landed with this new label. But again, you know, just cleaning it up, just making it, you know, just super visible, super simple, you know, recognizable, and just really fresh feeling from what was already out there. And then you have something like Jovial, where maybe that story wasn't coming through enough. In this case, this was a beer that Chris had brewed for his wedding, specifically for that. And it was such a huge hit and everybody loved it so much, they thought, like, let's just make this a full release. So that was where the inspiration for this came from. We really looked at wedding invitations and kind of stationery and that kind of feel to produce this label. And then that story kind of comes through on the side of the label. You can read a little bit about that. And as we started to take a step back and look at what can we do with the packaging overall, we landed on this idea of including a legend, which I've seen this more and more different breweries have kind of come out with it. But it makes a lot of sense, you know, just to guide, you know, the selection process of a beer. You know, you pick it up off the shelf. What am I getting into here? You have your ABV, you have your IBUs, you know, your bitterness, the color. Is it, you know, a seasonal beer? Is it year round? What hops are involved? What glass should I use? Depending on the beer, there's some different points here that we might want to call out. But it's really helpful. It's kind of like a fun little, you know, educational piece, like to help you understand the beer that you're drinking and kind of understand, you know, what you like and what you don't like. So overall, you know, this isn't, clearly everybody knows this isn't all the labels that we did. There are a lot more than this, but we landed on a system that, you know, whereas before it was kind of like, you know, you had the really cool illustrated elements that spoke to the handcrafted quality, you know, that artisanal kind of nature of craft beer, but maybe weren't quite as cohesive as they could have been. Maybe a couple too many colors going on. The logo got lost a little bit. Here we have a very pared down design that where the, you know, the logo comes to the forefront. The beers, you know, are type focused in all cases, with some iconography kind of mixed in. But, you know, a very cohesive system that kind of works across the whole family. But now what we're really going to talk about is, you know, the process from start to finish, because, you know, we did that whole rebrand. We did all the original labels for Tröegs back in, you know, 2015, 2016. But of course, they keep coming out with new beers and I've continued to work with them. And one thing that's really great about working with Tröegs is they always bring a super helpful brief to the beginning of the project, which, you know, any creative knows a brief is, you know, it's your guidepost. It's everything to a whole project. You really need to understand, you know, whatever you need to understand should be contained within that brief. Like, I like to do my own research. Like, clearly you kind of do that on your own, but the points that you need to make should be contained within that. And Tröegs is great about pulling out, you know, this is something that I'm teasing for a little bit later. You'll see, I think we mentioned that you're going to see a new release that's coming out spring 2021. Well, this is the brief for that. And you can kind of see here some points about that it's fresh and bright and there's harmony and it's the joy of discovering the perfect flavor. And then it gets into, you know, what are the brewers excited about? What are the hops that are involved? Of course, the beer style, the flavor of the beer. And then, of course, some visual cues you can see this is clearly something that's going to have that bright kind of citrus tropical flavor, very juicy, and just very happy and kind of light feeling. So just from a brief like this, you can get a really good feeling for, what kind of elements are going to make the most sense to include on that label. And, for Tröegs, it really, the starting point is always the flavor. The flavor informs the color choices. It informs, the iconography that we land on. We really want to communicate what you can expect to drink, through that label. And I'm showing this because we're going to talk about Haze Charmer, but in the case of Haze Charmer, it was a little unique in that they hit me up way earlier in the process than they normally do. In this case, they weren't even sure what the name of this beer was going to be yet. They were kind of figuring out what name they liked. So at this point, when they originally hit me up, it was called just Charmer. And, you can kind of see, all right, well, it's a hazy pale ale. It's helpful to know the style. And then you get into, some different kind of where their head's at as far as like thematically. Is there a mood that's kind of guiding this? So you can see, the grains and technique that create haze in this beer help to prop up and retain those hop oils, that being kind of core to the flavor of this. The timing of the hopping, so timing being kind of a crucial element in the brewing process. The hops and yeast working together to biotransform that hop flavor. And then just some kind of creative points on the name and what inspired that. That beer is a charmer, potions and oils, a little magical, a little mysterious, someone's ability to attract others, and, an object that's been magically charmed. So even from that, even without the kind of visual cues that we had on that earlier label, that earlier brief, you can kind of get, where this is going and what's important as far as conceptually to communicate with this label. So here's some sketches that I showed for the concept round of this. My sketches are super loose. I don't try to like kind of belabor them and make them too finely detailed, because I've always felt like, if something is a good idea, or if it gets across the point that you wanted to get across, like it'll do that in a rough sketch without kind of getting too far down, into the weeds of how it's designed exactly. So I want to make sure, even in its roughest form, that idea makes sense and is communicating what it needs to. So in the case of Charmer, this first option up on the top left here, clearly just taking directly from the brief. Oftentimes we really want to show like, okay, what am I getting? What's the literal interpretation of this brief? Just straight up going into the wizard's den and pulling some potions and bottles off of the shelves, and one of them's Charmer. And that's kind of the thinking behind that one. And then looking at, a snake kind of popping out of a big juicy hop and being transfixed by it, hypnotized by this hop. And finally, no surprise here, this is the earliest incantation of what ended up being the final design. Looking at the phases of the moon and astrology and kind of tapping into timing there, like back on the brief, that the timing of everything was really where this came from for me originally. And tapping into this phase of the moon, like this particular alignment of everything is exactly when this beer comes to life. So of course that bottom option was selected. We had a couple little rounds back and forth of like type. And once they figured out, okay, it's going to be called Haze Charmer, what are those other elements? Then we landed on the final design, taking inspiration from, Ouija boards and woodcut type, and really just finalizing. I mean, you can see how a lot of those original elements from that concept phase are here. It's not rapidly, widely evolved from, what they were originally seeing. This is where we landed at the final art. And the really cool thing about working with Tröegs that I enjoy is, they have a great in-house team too. And so they take this art, this key art, once I've developed it, and they apply it to, that original packaging that we designed through the rebrand, get the packaging put together, but then also everything from super cool glassware to apparel to, I love this bandana. And then something, unique for Haze Charmer, doing like a planchette, like a Ouija board planchette bottle opener, which is really super cool. So that's one of my favorite parts, is seeing how, all this stuff kind of comes to life after I've done that initial design, and what are they going to do with it. It's really fun for me to see. So going back to Joyous, that's the name, Joyous IPA. This is that brief you saw earlier. This will be part of 2021 hop cycle. It'll be out in the spring. It's replacing First Cut, so hopefully no big First Cut fans on the chat. It's going to be replacing it. We're super excited about this one. And you will be able to see how, all those citrus flavors, the tropical notes that we talked about, the bright, juicy colors, they all informed, I'm going to show you a couple sketches for Joyous too. These were the concepts that we came up with for Joyous. For me, the first thing I really thought about with this one, getting into those tropical notes, and it's fresh and juicy. You think it's spring, flowers are blooming, it's starting to be warm out. You feel great. I went back to, I'd love to be on vacation right now, wouldn't we all? My travels through, like Mexico and the Caribbean. I'm always super excited by the hand-painted signage that I see just everywhere on every type of business. Very colorful, very expressive, very unique. And that kind of informed both of these first two options for Joyous. The top left being, really thinking about signage in a produce market, just the freshest, ripest, tastiest stuff coming in. The second one, tapping into, these three hops, these three varieties that they chose for Joyous, really informed what they were doing here. So, calling out the Citra, the Azacca, I'm probably going to pronounce these wrong, Citra, Azacca, and Sabro, those three hops. Yeah, I got it. Thanks, Chrissy. So the second one there, again, calling to mind that kind of hand-done signage and taking in these three styles of hops. So specifically, if you really look at the varieties of hops, some of them are kind of stretched out and skinny, and then some of them are kind of rough looking, and they all kind of have their own unique characteristics. So tapping into that and really celebrating these three types of hops that are found in the beer, they were really excited about. And then finally, the last one, taking a look at a bisection of a hop cone and seeing the resin and the oils and the lupulin glands inside, was a really, was an interesting idea too. A lot of times that's that we do tend to go that way with Tröegs a lot, where, we want to tap into exactly what this aspect of the brewing process and the technical qualities of what makes a beer a beer. That's where that third one was coming from. But ultimately, and we can all think about okay, what's our favorite? Which one do we like the best? They went with option 2. And this is one that didn't change. Sometimes those sketches are super rough and there is quite a bit of an evolution from that concept phase to the final design. But in this case, the type didn't evolve, not a huge change from the concept phase here to the final design, bringing in these kind of bright yellows and oranges to really get that citrus note across. And this one's special to me because I have a soft spot for script typography, and I've shown Tröegs script on a couple different concept rounds, and it's never resonated with them. It's never really been right. But this time, I think just with just how expressive and how playful and happy we wanted to be with this one, I finally sold them on a script type. So I'm stoked on this one. You will see this coming out. I don't know exactly the month, spring 2021. Look out for this one. And that's my part. So thanks, everybody. I am going to hand this off to Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I know Grace has got a few things to say for transition, but I'm ready. Well, I'm going to try to be ready. That's a pretty tough act to follow.
How you take a beer from getting a brief to creating a design to actually bringing it to fruition. And we actually got a sneak peek of a new beer that's coming out for Tröegs. So everyone who's still on the stream, you got a sneak peek to a beer that's coming out here in early 2021. So we've seen a little bit about how we can bring Tröegs beer to life in the tap room, how we bring it to life the design on the can. And now I'm excited to even just leave the brewery altogether and get to the retail side of things, because Suzanne's going to bring in a whole fresh new perspective on what it's like to actually run and own and produce a store that has just, going back to that picture that Lindsey showed us, hundreds, maybe even thousands of beers that are on the shelf. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Suzanne, and hear a little bit more about Craft Beer Cellar and how you bring beer to life in your store.
Thank you so much. Like I said, that was a tough act to follow for me. It's pretty cool to hear from both of you in terms of really the liquid in the glass or the can or the bottle, and then also to really look at the graphics and hear from you, Lindsey, just in terms of what, kind of went into that. And we look at graphics all the time. We look at labels all the time. We look at names all the time. And man, have they gotten impressive. But it's cool to kind of get, get behind the scenes a little bit with you guys. It's tough for me now because I just went through a learning process with both of you. So it's making it, I feel I'm a little bit clouded here. But, all in all, Craft Beer Cellar starts from a place of passion. And we, it's pretty funny. As I said before, in 2010, there were 2,000 breweries in the U.S., and that was still quite a big number. I remember I came from the restaurant side, still in the retail premise world, but I came from that side. And I remember doing a beer dinner, and I don't remember which beer dinner it was, but it was like probably in 7 or 8, and it was one of the things that we sort of said, hey, welcome. And by the way, today we heard from the Brewers Association that craft beer is officially 3.8% of the, something like that. It was like less than 4%. And to look at it now where, it ekes toward 15% of the total beer market is impressive. And, it really shows the trajectory of growth that we've gone through in the last decade. So that's amazing. And with it have been, as Lindsey points out, she's out there looking around. She's a graphic designer and illustrator. She's looking at, the other really talented people that are out there that are putting some really great work in the market. But, the question really is, how do we bring the beer to the consumer, right? I mean, we get it in the store, we make those choices, and I'm not sure I have the perfect answer. The 3 elements that became the foundation for what, we sort of as beer misfits, that's how we sort of saw ourselves in the beginning. We were like, we've got to band together and find a way to get we knew there were people out there that, well, we felt that there were people out there. It turns out there were a few that believed in, sort of the same ideology in terms of, supporting these really cool flavors and chasing, organic ingredients and getting small maltsters, grain all the way through the glass. And, people ask me all the time, like, what is it? So if a beer is mass produced, you won't buy it or you won't support it. And Craft Beer Cellar's also evolved over time. And in fact, we went through this whole both rebrand. So Lindsey, it was really cool to hear from the designer side, because we were listening to our graphic team, and they did a great job as well. But when you said, John, obviously we know John and Chris pretty well, but when you said like, hey, it was cool to work with them, I hope that our designers said the same thing about us, because, it was a tedious process, right? Where you're like saying like, look, we think we need help in terms of how we grow our brand. And at the same time, you're saying, I don't know what the answers are. So you're the one that has the sort of the talent and stuff like that. So anyway, with a lot of evolution, at some point, we said, look, we don't support, any breweries that are mass produced or owned by, big breweries. And somewhere in the midst of the early, 3 or 4 years, we said, look, let's focus on the liquid in the glass. That ultimately is the bottom line for what we do. So much of it is relationship as well, and kind of who we know, but that really comes from the liquid in the glass, right? So it's like, to get back to the question that, a lot of customers ask, or a lot of people ask me is, so you won't support, a major brewery, a big commercial brewery. It's not really the case, but I always like to feel like breweries that we support and that we know their stories, actually have their hands in it, right? It's not just, they're going into this major production facility and pressing a bunch of buttons and then coming back and checking on time and temperature. And of course, to some degree, Tröegs is doing that, right? Christie, you have 250 employees. So it's not like you guys are climbing ladders and still dumping malt in, into the brew kettle, but you're not as, you're not as large as some of the bigger breweries, to my point. But yeah, I mean, for us, somewhere in the midst of, figuring out exactly how we would, bob and weave in the world of beer, right? Let's just call it beer, not craft beer, just beer, and trying to get people to, shout the rally cry with us was, really locking arms with breweries that we knew. I mean, that was a question in 2010. It was like, how are you going to do this? Who's going to go along with this these crazy shenanigans of opening a bottle shop where you're selling only beer? Like, are you crazy? I mean, don't you know liquor stores survive on, liquor markups and wine margins? Like, beer and in some part due to large breweries, beer markups and margins had been very, very small, 10, 20% to some degree. And, to even think about marking beer at a slightly higher margin than that, just, because we didn't have the liquor and the wine. Look, I mean, we found some people to go along with us, and Tröegs was there from the very first day. I do want to give, it's cool that we're on this, panel together, Christie and Lindsey. You guys have really put this beer together and brought it out to, the retailer. Tröegs, man, you guys are awesome. There's 12, 15 sort of regional breweries around the country, and we'll. And we can name them. You guys know who they are. They're Sierra Nevadas, the Dogfish Heads. The Sam Adams, to some degree, being a Boston-based company. These are the breweries that believed in the mission of the retailer that wanted to open a bottle shop, and we're talking about nailing down philosophical points of amazing beer, hospitality, and education. And people were looking at us like we're crazy. And it's like Chris and John that were like, no, I really get that. The question is, can you execute it? Can you get it done? And those are our pillars, right? So those are the things that we focus on every single day. Those are the things that we try to instill and teach in the people that we work with, both on a singular store level, but in store ownership. We interview and search and talk to people that we feel that share those passions, right? That understand, what it means to, pass through hospitality for us both, with our customers, of course, obviously our customers. The cool thing about being on the retail side is that they're our customers, but they're your customers. So we feel that we're the, we're kind of the gate holders or the key holders to, a customer that we share. And you're, a brewery is trusting in a retailer. And that's something that we try to instill is, it's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way street. And, it's up to a retailer to do the work. We see these labels. You can infer a lot of things by looking at a package. I saw the guitar pick, by the way. I saw it. I didn't think it was a guitar pick, but I think when I first saw the rebrand, I was like, what is that? Is that an abstract hop, or is it sort of looks like a guitar pick? But obviously we ended up going with the, sort of the inertia that it was an ingredient, kind of trying to be abstract, but without having the relationships and talking to the people, right? And, I mean, in a perfect world, you would have the time to make the phone calls, to establish the relationships, to talk to the Christies of the breweries, and or the Lindseys, hey, what was your thought process? So I can understand, where you are with this product, without having the time and the energy to be able to do that. You have to rely a lot on, your own work and, digging in a little bit and, getting on the internet. I mean, I always say, ask the Google box, because there's a lot out there. It doesn't mean it's always right, but with a little bit of research and work, you can come up with some good stuff. And then over time, the development of relationships. We couldn't be more proud to support a brewery like Tröegs and to continually see not just one or two of its standard beers, but 4, and also the seasonals, and to be there when people are going crazy looking for Master of Pumpkins and Mad Elf. And I remember in the very early days, there were days in April what we called, in like the first 3 or 4 stores that were open in the Boston area, we'd call them like Nugget Nectar Mondays. And for whatever reason, the product would come into the distributors in the Boston market on Fridays, and then it would be shipped out Monday morning. And as soon as the stores would launch it or like let their customers know, it was like, it would be gone. It would just be gone. And it was just a matter of establishing yourself. Like I said, it's a the hospitality pillar is a seesaw, and it really balances. The balance is between the customer and the brewery. For someone on the retail side, brewers are also our customers, as well as I think the breweries see us as the same way. So it is about relationship, and it is definitely about knowing those stories and knowing those details. You can't expect that you're going to get that everywhere, and that's why Craft Beer Cellar, we hope, is a little bit different. It's something that we push for every single day. Doing the work, tasting the beers, learning about Citra hops, for example, learning about Azaka or Idaho 7, a little bit of pine, and whatever the nuances are, so we can be great storytellers. Because ultimately, a good retailer or a great retailer, whether it's a wine shop or a beer store or anything else, I guess for that matter, is really just a great storyteller that's extremely hospitable. And that's what it comes down to. For us, it's being hospitable to our the brands that we believe in, and turning and getting that information out through the products, through the understanding of the products, and then helping the customer get all the way out the door. There's so many different elements of it that I could talk about forever and ever and ever. I love to talk about beer, but I think it's important to mention the other couple of elements of our philosophy, or the other 2 things that we call our pillars, which are the amazing beer part, and I think that kind of speaks for itself. It's one of the things that we get binged around a little bit on, because I think people see that sort of amazing beer, hospitality, education, and I think generally speaking, people maybe not, they don't align with it, but they know what hospitality at least is, and so for some it's customer service, but for us, we take it a little, a level higher. We have often said, customer service is a handshake, hospitality is a hug. I'm not sure everyone knows that, but from the perspective of amazing beer, it becomes subjective, right? Which is like, so what's amazing beer? What you all say is amazing beer, and it's I think we all know what is excellent, or excellent examples of beers that are in markets. We're not talking about beers that are that have pixie dust, or hops that were grown on the moon. I think that happened. Didn't they scientifically grow hops on the moon a couple of years ago? We don't do those things. What we really, really love most of all is excellent beer. Beer that's sort of free from explosions. That's a big topic in the beer world right now. Or things that are free from other unsavory, I would say, or unappealing flavors or aromas. But I think, as Christie said, there's no wrong answers per se. People are going to like different things. Some people like Sabro hops. Some people like Citra hops. Some people love Galaxy. Some people can't stand Galaxy because it's a little onion and chivy. And it's amazing beer is amazing beer. And we know what that is, because it's the same thing as amazing juice or amazing wine or amazing salad or amazing dressing on your salad. It's, you know, being overwhelmed or being pleased and not underwhelmed, whether it's about beer or anything else. But I think the thing that I want to spend a little more time talking about is the educational component, which is the third pillar of what we do and what we stand for and who we are. We take it very seriously, and we always have aspired to be better than, you know, we are and we can. But, you know, we're students of the trade. You know, learning, like I said, learning about hops, but, you know, doing the work. We've created our own educational platform so we can educate people from within the Craft Beer Cellar, you know, group or team. Of course, the pandemic has changed everything, so we can't do as much, you know, kind of in-person stuff as we once did. But you know, we're getting together before 2020 and, you know, kind of studying together on a weekly basis, doing a lot of stuff blind, because there's really nothing better. And Christie, you probably would certainly agree. If you want to learn anything about food or beverage, take away the label and take away your ability to know exactly what it is, and then you really put your senses in check, and you force your sensory, you know, through aroma and flavor, taste, those things to, you know, get busy. You've got to, you know, I've often said, and through some of the things that I've been involved in, you know, on tasting panels and things, I feel like I led a really sheltered life in terms of flavor. I find myself sometimes not knowing the difference between like a blackberry flavor and, you know, maybe a pomegranate. That might be a little bit extreme, but sometimes dark fruits can kind of run together, and you don't know if something is, you know, a cherry or a blackberry. And a lot of crazy things like, you know, can you tell the difference between citra fruits? And that's just a question I kind of ask myself. Can I pick out a yuzu, right, versus a lemon? You know, can I pick out a strawberry versus a passion fruit? And you know, fruits are some of the things that we trip up on. But like the pepper, spices, phenols. I don't like to get too geeky. I don't often say those things too much to customers because we think that some of those things go over their heads. So I mean, that's some of the stuff that exists inside our company, which is like we have like those are foul words. Like we don't ever say funky, or we try not to say funky to a customer. It's a word that we know, I think, generally speaking, socially, but not a word that conjures up really great things necessarily for customers. So we try to find other ways to say that, like, hey, we try not to say things like barnyard. And I think people that like that element of beer flavor are okay with it. But like, if you say that to a customer that's like just getting into beer, like, yeah, it's got a little barnyard aroma, that we may lose them. You know, they may be right out the door and not come back. So that's why it's kind of like a, you know, it's kind of like a yellow card word for us. We try to push ourselves to, you know, we're looking for that word evocative, and we learned that word from the Cicerone program as we've kind of all swam through some of their different levels of certification. And I remember the first time I heard it from the Cicerone program, I was like, you know, that's crazy. What, you know, what does it all mean? But you know, it's evocative. Yeah, it's a more colorful way to say it. So I do wanna leave some time for people to get in and ask some questions or whatever. People, I know there's some stuff popping up in the comment section. So you know, with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for the opportunity here, Grace and Christie and Lindsey. Really awesome sharing space with you guys tonight.
Definitely. Thank you, Suzanne. That was a super enlightening look into some of the behind the scenes at a craft beer retailer like Craft Beer Cellar. So I want to leave some time. I know that the VP debate is coming on up here pretty quick, but if you guys want to stick around, I would love to get into a little bit of Q&A because we touched on a lot of different areas, and I saw a lot of questions pop up throughout the course of the evening that I really wanted to touch on. One of the first things that I really wanted to get into, and I think this is a question that I personally had for everyone. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. But, this is a Women in Craft Beer Festival. And so you are all ladies that are killing it in the industry. But we like to tackle some of these questions and cultivate conversations around what it's like to be a woman in our respective fields. And I know, Lindsey, we've touched on this in the past. Even in advertising, you find that it's a similarly male-dominated atmosphere. So this is a question from Alicia. She wanted to get some thoughts from everyone on what it's like for women to become more involved in a male-dominated industry. Is it harder or easier nowadays? Because there have been some strides that have been made. Do you think that women are just being accepted more in general as being craft beer lovers? So, Lindsey, do you want to jump in here and kind of take this question on first, kind of from even advertising and craft beer perspective?
I can jump in for sure. I think my perspective on it, I'm in a little bit of a bubble. I work with Tröegs now on a freelance basis, and it's kind of like I'm a little on an island, when I work with them. And thankfully, they've been incredible to work with this whole time, and I haven't had to face any sort of like, ooh, that's weird, or any kind of like funky, barriers or anything like that. Have not, thankfully, been part of my personal experience. I know it's part of, I don't know, Christie, Suzanne, like if you have any thoughts on that, because I'm sure you're interacting with all kinds of dudes all day in the spaces that you frequent. Maybe you might have some more thoughts on the challenges there.
I think it's way easier. And I think, there are a lot of talented women that have done a lot of hard work, and it's a culmination of efforts. People are a lot more accepting of women today than they were a year ago, than they were, 5 years ago. So yes, if you're looking, I think her name was Alicia. If you're looking to get in this industry, get in, because you're not the adversity or kind of just like pushback that may have existed 10 or 15 years ago. It's not definitely as prevalent as it was. I know we still have work to do, and we still have focal points around making sure we're propping up gender and people of color, and there's always work to be done, but we're in a better place than we have been where women are concerned. So come on in, and if I can ever be a resource to anybody, it'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, and another challenge that we've really faced this year, obviously we're all having this virtual chat because of COVID-19 and what's happened with how it's affected our different businesses. So Christie, this is really a question for you that I wanted to pull up, but with tours being suspended for the time being, you mentioned that in the beginning that you guys haven't been able to host tours. Are you offering any other experiences to engage your fans, or how have you guys kind of rolled with the punches, because of what COVID has thrown you this year?
Yeah, it's something that we're definitely working on, trying to expand upon. So we've rolled out our virtual tastings for different beers that have been coming out. Hopefully you've seen a few of them. And we want to continue that trend. And, I ultimately would love to be able to bring back an element of tours to Tröegs for in-person events. And that, again, is something that we're working on. Unfortunately, it won't be in a tour capacity anytime soon, but that is to make sure that we're looking out for the health and safety of our staff members and for the guests themselves. That is our #1 priority right now. But my hope and my goal is that we can introduce some more classroom style events and educational events in the near future, especially with the holidays coming up. It's a really exciting and important time here at Tröegs.
And you have the new Joyous IPA that's coming up, hopefully next year, and hopefully there'll be ways for you to engage with that particular brand next year. And that kind of leads me into the another question that I saw here for Lindsey specifically that I want to pull up. So in terms of when it comes to your designs, you know, you've had a lot of experience in designing craft beer labels now. So what has been your favorite and why?
My favorite is probably Haze Charmer. I know it's the one that we're talking about now, but it just kind of taps into like my personal aesthetic, and like I tend to be into kind of like, you know, the darker aspects of life, and you know, kind of witchy stuff. So I don't know. I had fun playing with that one. It spoke to me on a lot of levels. One that I really love that isn't around anymore, if anybody remembers Crimson Pistol, that was my favorite for a while. It wasn't around for too long. It was a hibiscus. It was what, I forget the style exactly. It's been a little while, but it was hibiscus, and yeah, that was my number 2. Was it what? I thought it was an IPA. I didn't want to say, but yeah, I was thinking it was an IPA. Yeah. And then Perpetual, I still have a soft spot for, and it's extra special because it's like, you know, I believe it's the number 1 IPA in Pennsylvania. So that adds another little kind of layer to it, but I love how simple that one is. You know, it's just simple, clean, iconic, like you can spot it from a mile away, kind of thing. So I like Perpetual a lot too.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned that in the comments. It wasn't about Perpetual. It was about Legends, I think, how the simplicity of design was really clean and crisp and eye-catching. You know, it seems like you've really, through designing labels, you know, been able to really connect with Tröegs and, you know, kind of become a part of the family. I'm wondering, you know, Suzanne, I think you have, as you mentioned in your talk, had that chance to connect with breweries in the same way and kind of learn who they are as you've gone through the years and kind of developed this wealth of knowledge and relationships. And this is actually just a question that I have for you that I'm wondering, but do you have a particular story to share with us about one brewery that you've really developed a relationship with that maybe, you know, they were up and coming, you found them, you learned more about their story, you started featuring them on your shelves, and now, you know, they became a big brewery or something like that? Is there a cool story that you have about one brewery that you really connected with and helped develop, other than Tröegs?
Yeah, probably so many, but I'll mention 2 that are in the Boston area. One I was thinking about yesterday, Bantam Cider, not a brewery, but a cidery, just 2 owners, and like literally the Jim Cook story of like going around and peddling product and trying to, you know, not going in large stores because, you know, people don't tend to give you tons and tons of time at these big stores, and, you know, you don't get access to, you know, buyers or owners or whomever. But I remember trying Bantam's Wonderkin cider and just kind of being blown away by it. I'm not really, in all fairness, a big cider drinker. I do try it all. But generally speaking, the undercarbonations just doesn't land right on my palate. So I try it all, but I remember feeling pretty moved by it. That was one, and now I think that they're pretty big and pretty well respected in the Boston area. And, you know, when I see them or see them on the shelf somewhere, I always just kind of smile and say, we'd hope that, you know, as a collaborative group, especially in the Boston area, that we were part of that. You know, they're still the number 1 selling cider in several of our stores in the Boston area. Another one that I just love, and they're getting ready to come out with a dark mild, which who makes a dark mild, is Small Change. And, you know, big shout out to them. Husband and wife team, just contract brewing, brewing up over the border in New Hampshire. They actually both had come to a lot of our events, a lot of our, you know, kind of in-person tasting stuff as we were doing stuff years ago only at the flagship store. And we kind of got to know them, Mike and Emily. And yeah, I mean, he was certainly a pretty heavy hitting home brewer at the time. And yeah, I mean, they just decided to go for it and figured out, you know, where they were going to brew their product, where it made sense. And, you know, they brought a lot of beer for us to try, and we were like, this is fantastic stuff. And, you know, we kind of pushed them. We felt like, you know, big sisters in a way. We were like pushing them, you know, off the diving board, like, come on, you can do this. Like, not that they needed us, but, you know, the dark mild, I remember trying it before it was in production. We were like, this is so amazing. You have to brew this beer, and it's just about believing in yourself it doesn't matter what you do. And I think, you know, we've helped them with their own self-confidence a little bit and watched their beer be received an exploding charm in the Boston area. They're tiny, but people really love them, and they make incredible liquid.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing way to, I know we're a little bit over time here, but to kind of wrap up our panel, Suzanne, what you said about, you know, it's just about believing in yourself. And if that you're someone in the industry, whether you're a woman out there or someone else that is looking to drink more beer or even get involved in the industry, just believe in yourself. Like, this is the future. And I think it's the future of craft beer. And I guess my last question to all of you would just be, you know, if we had this same conversation again 3-5 years from now, you know, where do you see the industry, or where do you hope the industry will be in terms of, will there be more women drinking craft beer? Will there be more women working in the industry? You know, will we not even need a Beers Without Beards festival anymore because, you know, everything is equal and peachy? You know, that's obviously the goal, I think, for all of us. So if we just have any final thoughts, I'll leave that up to anyone who wants to chime in about where you would hope the industry will be in 3 to 5 years from now.
Yeah, I actually would love to take that. Just based on personal experiences here, I've been with Tröegs for 6 years now, working with the tour department. And initially, there weren't a lot of women coming on the tours. And normally, if they were being pulled along with their husband or their boyfriend or their significant other. Today, that is completely the opposite. You know, we are seeing a lot of women coming in groups. We see bachelorette parties. We see just women on their own. They're having their day off, or, you know, maybe they're just looking for something fun to do for an afternoon, and they're coming to Tröegs and coming on tour with us and learning about craft beer and what we do here. So it really has been inspirational to see that development and that change and that growth. And hopefully, you know, within the next 3 to 5 years, that will only continue to grow and develop. And I look forward to that.
I'll just jump in and say, you know, we need breweries to keep making good liquid, but I believe that the path forward for females is through education, and we need people to keep pushing that needle forward, and keep talking about beers and what's in them and how it got there and who created logos and the designs and so on and so forth. We're reaching people, and somehow we're reaching them, and then they're showing up at breweries, and Christie's taking them on tours. And so we've piqued the interest, and that can only go up. That really can only go straight up. So we've got to all just keep, you know, we've got to keep our arms locked and keep working and keep pushing forward. I think we'll be in a better place in 5 years. And hopefully, you know, at least my hope is, I don't think it's 50-50 right now. I think sometimes, you know, when we look at stats on, you know, socials and things like that, we're seeing numbers that are well over 30%, you know, with female engagement. I hope in 5 years we're close to 50-50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's my hope as well. And you guys are all, Christie, you were saying it's been inspiring for you to see, you know, women coming into the brewery, and sometimes often by themselves or just in groups, you know, to hang out and have lunch or do a bachelorette party or whatnot. You guys are all an inspiration too in this industry. So I just wanted to thank you all for joining us tonight to talk a little bit more about bringing beer to life. I want to thank Tröegs and Craft Beer Cellar for helping us put on a panel that kicked off Beers Without Beards. So we have a great week of programming planned. We have events on Thursday. We're doing a sensory workshop tomorrow with Two Roads. We're doing a virtual cooking class on Friday with New Belgium and the Queer Food Foundation. And then on Saturday, we have a full slate of events all day, from a beer cocktail class at Jägermeister to Women in Beer Leadership Roundtable to a live art class in collaboration with Collective Arts. So just wanted to thank you all for joining us. If you want to join us at any other events, make sure to check out hopculture.com/BWOB20. And of course, follow us at Hop Culture Mag. And so I will sign off for tonight, and hopefully we'll see you guys at some other events during Beers Without Beards for the rest of the week. So Christie, Lindsey, Suzanne, thanks so much again. And I'm gonna
Thanks, everyone.
my Haze Charmer.
Thank you.
Cheers. I know we couldn't get to everybody's questions. Look me up, shoot me an email. I'm happy to shoot the shit, answer your questions. I'd love to talk to you some more. So thanks everyone for coming.
Same. Look me up. You can find me on Craft Beer Cellar. I'll answer any questions and be a resource.
Just
Good night, everybody. Enjoy the debate.